The Siege of Orison has some problems. It's good, but it could easily be great with a few fixes to the fundamentals. So then, the Siege of Orison is the latest massive dynamic event that has just hit Star Citizen. It arrived with a new update, patch 3.17.2. The update also included a whole load of other things, a few of which I've mentioned in a previous video. In this video though, I'll be talking exclusively about the Siege. Now, as you probably picked up from the opening of the video, I feel that the Siege of Orison does have quite a few problems. But that said, don't get me wrong, I actually do enjoy playing it and will definitely be continuing to play it. And that is way more than I can say about the FPS shooting segments of some other space games out there. At any rate, the intent of this video isn't to beat down on Star Citizen. Instead, I'm expressing a few thoughts here in an attempt to point out where Siege could be improved. And this makes sense, right? After all, Star Citizen is still in alpha, so now is the perfect time to take a close look at the new features and make suggestions for where and how those features could be improved. I mean, if you don't make these suggestions and comments during alpha, then when are you supposed to make them? All of this then is based upon my multiple playthroughs of the event, so let's get to it. Orison is the cloud city that floats in the atmosphere of the gas giant Crusader. The city is comprised of a number of separate platforms which essentially act as districts. These are the main ones that contain the hubs, shops, hospital, starports and all those things. With the Siege of Orison, players now have access to a number of additional platforms. These additional platforms have been overtaken by the pirate gang known as Nine Tails. The group has infiltrated the Orison friend or foe system that controls the defense turrets and turned them against the guards and population of the city. It's the player's job then to infiltrate these platforms, take down the Nine Tails hostiles, eliminate the ranking commanders, and ultimately regain control of Orison's friend or foe defense system. The event plays out across a large map built from multiple platforms. There is a player cap of 50 players, or it might be 75 players actually. The event is entirely PvE focused, although of course there's nothing stopping players from killing each other. The Siege itself is constantly playing out, and players can access it at any time from the Crusader showroom shuttle bay. The shuttle will carry players to the event. The Siege itself can be attempted solo, in pickup groups, or with an organised group of friends. It really is entirely up to you. The concept for Siege of Orison does sound amazing on paper. Also, the fact that it seamlessly integrated into Star Citizen Persistent World makes things even better. The idea of leaving your hab, gearing up with armour and weapons at your local store, and then hopping onto your ship to head towards this open large-scale event, well, it's extremely compelling. It gets even better when you reach the orbit of Crusader and receive a verbal radio message asking for your assistance. This then is one of Star Citizen's greatest strengths, the sensation of an open, dynamic world that is both alive and large of scale. The idea that one of the game's main cities has come under attack is also extremely interesting. Ultimately, the concept of the event is a great one. Execution of the event, however, is quite a different story. The problems with the Siege of Orison are numerous. But before I get into the details on this, do keep two things in mind. Firstly, this is just my own personal take. It's an opinion. Whilst that opinion is based upon decades of experience with both space games and FPS games, it is still just an opinion nonetheless. Secondly, whilst I feel there are some very clear and obvious problems and faults with the Siege of Orison, I did still enjoy it, and I will continue to play it. That in itself should be quite telling of my overall thoughts towards the whole Star Citizen game. There is a third thing here that I briefly just want to touch on. Yes, there are numerous problems that people are experiencing with the Siege of Orison, some people not able to play it, various other issues going on. Those are generally to be expected with the release of a new event. Some people may feel it shouldn't have been released just yet or held back, but that isn't the focus of this particular video. What I do want to focus on is the event itself, the gameplay that has been released. Now, this will likely be a point that some people do disagree with, but the Siege of Orison is extremely disorganised. Getting into the event is simplicity itself. Accept a Siege of Orison mission from your Moby Glass, then head to the top of the Crusader showroom on Orison. From here, a shuttle will take you to the mission areas. Now, as I said, you are free to do this on your own or go with other people. In my experience, it doesn't really make much difference to the outcome of the missions. It's unlikely in the extreme that you will have found the mission even if you do go it alone. More on that further into the video. The real problem with disorganization comes with the fact it's never really clear what is going on at any one moment. Once the current mission objective is shown clearly at the top of the screen at all times, it's impossible to know what other players are currently doing. In fact, more often than not, someone else can be in the final stages of the mission. Once they complete the final leg, it's then mission complete. This can happen with or without your involvement. Just so long as you're on one of the platforms, the game will consider that you have done your part, regardless of just how much or how little you helped out. Another issue here is that it's never really apparent how many other players are on the mission with you. The UI element here would help immensely. The complexity or simplicity of that UI is certainly open to interpretation, but at the very least, a number indicating the amount of players currently involved at any one moment in the game or in the event would go a very long way. Even better would be a UI element indicating the number of players on each specific platform. This would immediately highlight to players where all the action is, and players could then head to the relevant section. So yeah, overall, while the organisation of the mission itself is, it's okay, it's not too bad, there's a lot of disorganisation when it comes to what other players are doing. Of course, players could play in organisations here, and those were likely to be far more organised, but generally, that's really not the way everyone plays. There's a lot of people playing solo, and there's a lot of pickup groups going on as well, so really, the game should do a much better job of managing all this, or at least giving players an indication of how to manage this. Star Citizen is an amazing, seamless experience when it comes to moving from A to B. Whether that is leaving your hab and walking through a city to board your ship, or landing on a planet and disembarking in a vehicle. Give or take numerous bugs, it all works extremely well, and there's nothing else out there that comes close to comparing. Unfortunately though, this level of smooth action doesn't extend to the Siege of Orison. There's a couple of reasons for this. Some are easier to forgive than others. One problem is the very poor and low frame rate and the low server performance. Now, I play Star Citizen on what I feel is a fairly decent PC. Ryzen 7 5800X with the RTX 3080. The game is installed on a Samsung 980 Pro M2 drive. My connection is a 1GB line, and yes, the user data folder is always cleared. Now, generally when I play Star Citizen, the frame rates are good in most places. I generally get really good performance throughout the game. For the Siege of Orison, however, they are noticeably very low. I'm fully aware that this is 100% down to server issues. It's something that will quite possibly get resolved in the future with new tech such as server meshing. Therefore, I'm willing to forgive the current low frame rates. But that said, it does impact the experience, which in turn does degrade the overall action. Far worse than this, however, is the game's AI. The NPCs, for the most part, are worse than useless. They're incapable of reacting. They're generally unaware of their environments. They are completely unable to challenge the player whether they are alone or in groups. In fact, you'll have noticed in the footage on screen right here that I have deliberately been very slow in taking down all the hostiles. This has been a very deliberate act to highlight and display the behaviour of the AI. A single shot into the AI, give it a few moments to see if they react, and then take them down with a few more shots. You'll also notice that the other AI within the area simply do not react. I was able to play through the entire sequence multiple times in this exact same manner. Indeed, as you'll see again and again throughout all of this footage, I gave the NPCs every opportunity to react. In some cases, even running directly towards them, holding off fire just to see if they would do anything. I never once felt under threat by them at any point during my multiple playthroughs. The NPCs then lack any sense of coordination for either defense or attack. Now, to be perfectly clear here, I haven't played Siege of Orison with an organized group. However, I have played it with both pickup groups as well as solo. In all cases, it makes little difference to the overall difficulty of the event. For better or worse, the NPCs are currently mindless and devoid of life. Again, I fully understand that yes, this is an alpha, and that yes, the AI will probably improve with future tech. However, this one is harder to forgive than the frame rate, as the Siege of Orison event is designed around Ninetales' occupation of Orison. Unfortunately, Ninetales are mindless, unthreatening, and lack any form of challenge. As I made clear at the beginning of the video, for the most part I have been enjoying the Siege of Orison, despite all the aforementioned issues. The event does integrate well into the game as a whole. The platform maps themselves are designed fairly well. Of course, the maps don't hold a candle though to dedicated FPS games such as Call of Duty and Battlefield or other such titles. And to be frank, they really should be as good, but they aren't. That said though, this isn't really something I consider to be a big issue. That's because the environments themselves are artistically well designed. They're great to look at, great to experience, and they really do feel the part. It's also worth mentioning and worth remembering that these are not intended to be multiplayer action maps, so therefore don't need to be perhaps as high quality as you might expect in other FPS games. Moving on, the concept of the Siege of Orison is a very good one. As I said, it really does make players feel involved, and it very much feels a part of the game world. Successful integration of these type of events into a game is something that isn't very easy to pull off. A lot of live service titles do foul at this when they do attempt it, but in concept, CIG have succeeded here. The problem is, as mentioned, with execution. The Siege of Orison then is clearly an extremely important step for Star Citizen. The game is certainly going to need these type of events as it continues to evolve. Further, it's likely these concepts might form the foundations for future missions and even future campaigns. The downside is that CIG have implemented an event that the current version of Star Citizen is completely incapable of handling. From terrible AI to poor server performance and frame rates. Bugs, meanwhile, are to be expected and can, in part at least, be overlooked due to the alpha nature, although the bugs too would of course eventually need to be fixed. The takeaway conclusion is that it really is hard to judge what Siege of Orison should be. Star Citizen is still too dependent upon currently in development technology that still has no release date. It's possible that Siege of Orison of 2024 will be infinitely better than 2022's version. However, for that to happen, CIG really need to understand that exceptional AI is vital to these types of events. Additionally, these events need to provide a real challenge. So then, the current Siege of Orison serves as a nice theme park ride, giving some insight into what one day might be possible. It takes a bit of imagination to see all of that, but it is visible. This, however, leads us on to another problem, and that is some of the players currently onboarding into Star Citizen. Thanks to the game's current marketing, that is targeting at AAA game players. It's highly likely that some of these players will have high expectations from an event like Siege of Orison. With this event, CIG are competing directly with the big boys, and right now they aren't even on the same planet, let alone the same league. There's a lot of FPS shooters out there, and many of them have decades of experience and a whole lot of quality to them. Now, whilst CIG and whilst Siege of Orison can't compete right now with this, for people like me and perhaps for many of you watching this video, it's not really much of a problem. The game will probably get there eventually. For other people though, it might be a very real issue. Siege of Orison then is an awesome concept. It's definitely fun when it works, and it integrates well into the Star Citizen universe and game. Unfortunately though, it needs a lot of work on the execution. That then brings us to an end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.